I am Jim Douglas. I'm a family court judge in Kanawha County, and one of the first things that I have to address in any Supreme Court justice candidate or Supreme Court justice elect would have to address is their qualifications. West Virginia, excuse me, is a state that elects its justices for 12-year terms. I have qualifications, I think, that allow me, and I think unique qualifications that allow me to vie for that office. I have 43 years in the practice of law, either being a judge or an attorney. I have tried cases in 44 of the state's 55 counties. That is, and mainly are, cases having to do with family law and domestic relations. I was a law clerk for William M. Kidd, who was a former federal judge. I clerked with him when he was a state judge. And I was a divorce lawyer for 39 and a half years before I became family court judge. The last 25 years of which were exclusively family law. The first years were split up between general and family. And I was also prosecuting attorney in Braxton County for a term. I've been family court judge since 2017, January 1. I have served as an adjunct professor of law at Bluefield/Glenville State College when Bluefield took them over. And then also I've been an adjunct professor of law at Fairmont, now Fairmont State University, but at that time it was Fairmont College. I have been a CLE instructor. I've done over 30 sessions, all of them in family law, over the last 28 years. I have, CLE instructor means continuing legal education instruction. I am a published author. I have been published in Family Law Advocate of the ABA, which I was very proud of. Divorce Source, I've written articles for, and the Family Law Bulletin recently. My last one was in 2018. I have argued over 40 cases to the West Virginia Supreme Court of Appeals. Now that's 33 of them are actual cases involving where there was a decision reached. The remaining ones, which are really greater than 8, probably closer to another 15, were before the rules changed in 2020, you had to argue before the rules changed in 2010, you had to argue those cases to be able to get in, and then you had a subsequent argument. It was called writ of certiorari. And I probably had another 20 or so cases of that over the time period that I've been a practitioner. As a judge, I sit on family law cases of every stripe, but when I was a practitioner, I have tried every case imaginable, as professionally imaginable. I have, was a prosecuting attorney, as I said, so that means I've tried all kinds of criminal law cases, but also had a stint doing special education law. I've done boundary line litigation, unemployment, administrative law, guardianships, conservatorships, mental hygiene. I've done car wrecks. I've done personal injury. I have done slip and fall, condemnation cases, where the government takes your land, you have to defend against it. Adverse possession cases. I've done corporation work. I've done some bankruptcy and tax as it affects the cases of domestic relations. But I've also run a law office. I've been an employer. I've been a principal and owned a law office. Not every candidate can say that. And I have never been a big firm member. In other words, I've never been a member of a major firm in the state of West Virginia or anywhere else. And I have been admitted to the bar in West Virginia, Colorado, all the federal courts, including the United States Supreme Court. And I have taught, as I said, CLEs over the 28 years or so in Colorado, California, and West Virginia. So, and I'm also a member of the American Academy of Matrimonial Lawyers. I'm one of, I think, 5 in the state of West Virginia. I'm inactive now because I'm a judge. My greatest qualification, I'm sure you won't hear this too often, is that I'm a father. I've had 3 children. I've had and do have 6 grandchildren. and I've been divorced. So in the ambits of family law and all the aspects of family law, not only am I academically prepared, but I'm also historically prepared by virtue of my family relationships. I've been asked to state what I think my vision for the court is if I were to get elected. I think my overall mission is to do the right thing and to do it quickly as possible. The Supreme Court now, I think, sits on cases on an average of anywhere from 14 to 18 months without issuing decisions. Then when the cases are remanded back down to the circuit courts and the family courts, we are told to process these cases in a shorter period as 30 days. I don't think that's right. I think that you have to practice what you preach, and they should be doing that. But in terms of what I have for a vision as opposed to a mission for the court, is I want to restore practical experience to the court. And I hope I'm loud enough that that reaches every county in West Virginia. The other thing I want to do is restore the predictability function to the court. Yes, we have people on the Supreme Court that have law degrees and have long history in certain areas of the law. But the predictability function, the stare decisis, the thing has been decided or the thing stands. You know, that doesn't seem like there is any, I mean, in practice, Supreme Court's not following prior decision, and that's important. As a practicing lawyer, as I have been, and as a peer in front of me, you have to be able to talk to your clients and say, if this is a set of circumstances and this is the law, this is going to be the likely result. If you don't follow stare decisis, if you don't follow the law of the precedents, then the predictability function of law goes to the wayside. We don't have law. We have a casino. You hope it works out, and then sometimes the richer and the more powerful get their way. We can't have that. The other thing I want to do is part of my 3R vision. One is restore practical experience. Two is restore the predictability function. But three is to restore the budgetary opportunity. Now, what I mean by that is since the Lawfrey debacle of 2018, the Supreme Court budget has to be approved by the legislature. They don't set their own budget anymore. They just used to be they set their own budget and said, all right, legislature, you approve it. That's the way it was. Constitutional amendment 2018 ended all that. That was proposed in 2018. And when I'm saying budgetary opportunity, that means that we put in our budget things that, again, affect the most important stuff, most important cases, I think, in West Virginia. That's family law cases. We take the opportunity to insert in that budget things that are going to mean something so you don't have to go to the legislature, every session of legislature, and argue for funding on a proper program. For instance, I propose putting in the budget of the Supreme Court monies and sufficient monies to run foster care and finance foster care. Don't go to the Supreme Court. You all may remember this session of the 2020 Supreme Court was going hat in hand of the legislature, and then some people were getting on the bandwagon. It's in the legislature saying, all right, we got to fund properly foster care. Well, sure, but do it in the budget of the Supreme Court. Put it in the budget of the Supreme Court's control. They know more about it than people maybe that are in the legislature that were car salesmen or insurance agents or farmers or manufacturers. Not that I'm looking down on any profession. I'm just saying everybody has their expertise. And Supreme Court controlled it. Another thing in the budgetary item could be that in family courts across the state of West Virginia, you can have a budgetary provision that provides for daycare for people when they come to family court. They don't have to hire somebody to look after their kids. I've been a judge when there have been litigants saying, come in with maybe it's 2 to 3 children, say, I don't have anywhere else to leave them, Judge. I have to be here. And, this is about them and so on. And, that's a little bit of a pandemonium in a courtroom, but I can understand where they're coming from. 3, we ought to have situations where family court judges are funded, at least in terms of facility or having the resources, to hold Saturday court at least one time a month to allow people not to have to miss work to come to family court. That could be the same thing in other courts too, not just family courts. You could have daycare for people that come and show up for jury trials. You know, you could have, also you could have in these other courts, you could have them having Saturday court as well. I mean, having it properly funded. I think another thing that needs to be in the budget is funding guardians ad litem properly. That's attorneys that represent the interests of children in a potentially abuse and neglect situations. And for guardianships, have them properly funded. In other words, if a grandmother comes in and has to take over the grandchildren because the parents have suffered from some addiction and they're absent, those people don't get money. Maybe they might get the redirection on the Social Security, but they don't get any money or stipends from the state in most cases. So why not put that in the Supreme Court budget? I'm afraid I'm starting to get on my soapbox and preach. I'll try to refrain from doing that. Why am I running? Well, I think it's popular for judicial candidates, Supreme Court, to say, well, I want to go up there and make sure that it's transparent and they're fiscally responsible and we're not going to buy any more couches, $32,000 ilk. Well, of course, I can say that. Everybody can say that. You expect the judges to be fiscally responsible and to do their job and be transparent. Or sometimes I hear people say, well, candidates say, it's always been my dream to be on the Supreme Court. Well, I think that's a little bit selfish and self-serving. My feeling personally is that I have an obligation to try to be elected to the Supreme Court. It was never my dream. It's an obligation as a lawyer and a citizen of the state of West Virginia, as a judge, and seeing the things I've seen. And this is why I'm the family court judge candidate. I'm the family court domestic relations, around the kitchen table family candidate. West Virginia is tied with Arkansas as the third most divorces per capita, according to the National Center for State Courts. Just out of curiosity, Nevada's number one. Oklahoma, go figure, is number two per capita. West Virginia, if you look at the Supreme Court's website, you will see that the West Virginia Supreme Court has filed in that court more direct domestic relations cases than any other cases. That's including criminal cases, more domestic relations cases. Look, in 2019, there were 84 more domestic relations than criminal cases filed in the Supreme Court. In 2018, there were 104 more cases. So in 2019, 2018, you have the continuing trend, and it's been that way for some years. There are more family court cases filed in the Supreme Court. Why is that? I mean, why is it important that you have somebody that has a family court background on the Supreme Court? Family law matters touch everyone. They touch everyone. Whether you're talking about divorce, whether you're talking about custody, whether you're talking about allocations, whether you're talking about domestic violence, whether you're talking about grandparents' rights, LGBTQ rights, relocation to other states with children, it touches everyone. I'm a candidate in Division 2, that is a full 12-year term. There is another race in Division 1 that is a 12-year term. In Division 3, there is a 4-year term, which is an unexpired term. Why is this all significant? Well, the West Virginia Supreme Court needs there a justice that has a family law background. I'm going to now go to judicial philosophy. I'm what's called a judicial activist, or at least in my philosophy or my attitudes. That is someone or a judge that believes in loose construction of the law, not sticking to the strict letter of the law. Does that sound bad? Well, for a trial judge, it's different than it is for a justice Supreme Court. A trial judge in trials, that's a middle or lower court judge, has to follow the law. That's part of that stare decisis as well, and part of the record. But nevertheless, a Supreme Court justice is charged not only with enforcing the law in a sense, making sure that it does stay predictable, but they're also responsible for the policy of the law. And what I mean by that, there's a changing society. The law has to keep up, or it's meaningless. And we have to keep up with the changing needs of a changing society. Benjamin Cardozo, who was on the United States Supreme Court, once remarked when asked about these things about law and strict construction and so on and so forth. He said the law never is. The law is always about to be. That means it's in a state of flux. So we have to have judges that are activists. They know what society needs. They just can't take refuge in tradition and history. Yes, the intent of the framers is there, but they meant for the Constitution to be a flexible, living, organic specimen, a document that lives and breathes 200 years later. Why vote for me? Well, I've mentioned all those qualifications up there. That's one of the considerations. I think one that you should take into consideration a little bit more is I don't have, and I did not seek any endorsements from any group. Yes, I filled out their questionnaires, mainly because I thought people everywhere ought to know where I stand on issues. But just as an average voter myself in the past, when I looked at people that had all these endorsements, that made me always wonder what they cost. It made me always wonder if they were judicial candidates, how those endorsements were going to be paid for at some point. I know if I were on the other side just as a party and there's a judge that had gotten elected on multiple endorsements and one of those people or organizations were on the other side, it'd make me wonder how impartial they were going to be. I'm independent. I'm not, this may sound archaic, but I'm my own person. I don't owe any interest group anything at all. What I think people need to understand and why to vote for me is you sit around the kitchen table today. See, I grew up in Clay County and spent most of my professional life in Braxton County. And we used to have in the mornings when most of the family talks would take place before school or hitting the old school bus was around the kitchen table. And I feel around the kitchen table in the state of West Virginia, I know this COVID-19 virus has taken up a lot of time, a lot of people's concerns, but if we didn't have that, or before that happened, and after this thing is concluded, when people sit around the kitchen table drinking coffee in the morning, they're not going to care whether some corporation in West Virginia got a major tax credit. They're not going to care whether or not there's an intermediate appellate court. They don't give a daggone whether or not some rinky-dink county in Virginia wants to join the state of West Virginia. They don't care whether or not we're going to have metro government in the future. When they sit around that kitchen table, when my family sit around that kitchen table, when your family sit around that kitchen table, the things that concern you and most of the people is whether or not your son and daughter is going to get a fair shake in a divorce. Whether or not you as a grandparent are going to get to see that little grandchild again. Whether you as a working single mother are going to get your child support that month. Those are the things that concern people sitting around the kitchen table. And that's why I call it my kitchen table, my kitchen table campaign. That's for one. That sounds archaic and a little bit folksy, and I don't mean to be. But as you sit around the kitchen table, that's what's important. And then, lastly, I can say, why should you vote for me? Well, because I have been down that road as a lawyer and a practicing attorney. I've been down that road as a family court judge, and I've been down that road as a human being. We can have all these things in the world that we want to have. We can talk about tax reform and unemployment rates and bringing coal back as an energy source and tourism in West Virginia. The reality of life is family law, because it again touches everyone. It again is something all of us are touched with it. And then number two, if you had a case up there and there was nobody with family court experience sitting on there, is your case with your little granddaughter or your son or daughter or your kids important enough? I think it would be. You'd want somebody up here like me that's going to say to those other four that don't have the experience, wait a minute, what about the kids? How's this going to affect this family? Did you all think about this? So that's what I'm asking you to do. Think about this. Again, conclusion, I'm Jim Douglas. I'm a candidate for the Supreme Court, Division 2. I'm a family court judge in Kanawha County. And I guess I'm saying I'm a Braxton County native. But I've been in Kanawha County for quite a spell. All right? I have nothing else to say. Thank you, Ms. Manzo, and thank you, the Morgantown Area Partnership.